Welcome to today's edition of Mental Health Matters. Today I have Fatuma on the show. She's going to talk about her experience with leaving Africa and coming to America. Get you something to drink, get you a snack, and come on back. Good morning. Welcome to our show. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, and how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for being
Oh,
willing to let me interview you. I know we
okay.
met and we talked, and I was actually a lot of questions about coming from your country to America. So I just kind of want to dive in and see what that was like for you, and let other people know what it's like living in Africa and how it is coming to America. So why don't we start off with you introducing yourself, and then we'll go from there.
My name is Fatma. I'm from South Africa. Um, I've been in the US now for a year and 10 months.
Okay. Wow. So, what brought you here to America?
Um, I like visiting,
Okay.
and so I travel a lot. Whenever I have like a lot of money to spare, I travel. And I came here to join a friend
Okay.
and to actually visit a friend. So I came in March
Okay.
uh 20 2020, and then I went back home, and then but that then it was dead. It was like there was nothing going on here because it was COVID. It was during the
Okay.
COVID time. And then I came back again in 2022
Okay.
uh, to visit again. And yeah, so
So,
the rest is basically history.
okay. So, I'm curious to see what it was like for you when you visit on your very first trip coming from South Africa. Like, was it a culture shock? Was it did we move too quick for you, or was it just like, okay, this is different, but it's a good different?
I think it was a bit of a culture shock because, when you watch American movies, especially on the road, I was so surprised to see so many foreign cars. Because when you watch a movie makes you believe that everybody's driving a big old American car,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And when I saw the cars on the road, I was like, my goodness, this is just like South Africa. It's like driving on a South African road, you
Yeah.
know. And there isn't that many American cars on the road. It's mainly foreign cars. And also another thing I was really shocked about, it's very clean.
Oh, really? America, really? Okay.
America is very clean. It's
Wow.
so clean. It's like, they take the time to clean all the main streets. Well, now that I live here, then I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
you know,
Wow.
yeah, but the main streets and the important areas, they're very clean.
Wow.
And Africans dirty the place.
Okay.
It's a fact. It's not a lie.
Yeah.
Africans, they have a tendency to dirty the place. I mean, I know I worked in Johannesburg
Uh-huh.
Central, and I would get to Johannesburg at like 6 in the morning, and the streets will be clean, and they'd be sanitized and they'd be like so amazing.
Yeah.
And then you go for lunch
Hmm.
and the streets would be something totally different. Like the minute people come in, they start trashing the place, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
So here it's very different. People are very conscious of cleanliness.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So, Fatuma, I'm just curious, what was it like growing up in South Africa for you? I want to kind of dive into that because, as you know, here in America, we watch a lot of different movies concerning
Yeah,
Africa or
yeah.
other countries and things like that. So, what was that experience like growing up for you? Was there like, I mean, well, you could just tell me, but I was seeing that, like men may have several wives or, there's arranged marriages and, like, what was
Yeah.
growing up in Africa like for you? And then we could dive into that because I'm just curious.
Well, I was born during apartheid in South
Okay.
Africa, and that was tough. You
Okay.
know, that was really, really tough because we didn't have like proper accommodation. Money was scarce because
Yeah.
the black people were oppressed.
Yeah.
Um, Also, most of the black people they didn't have like a proper education.
Mm-hmm.
So we lived. It's kind of like what they have here in the U.S., which is like a reservation, but we call it a location.
Okay.
I was born in a location. Basically, all the black people, you were either born in the rural areas or you were born in the location.
Okay.
Because they had what was called influx control, where they control the number of black people that moved from the rural areas to the cities.
Wow.
So the rural areas had they preferred that everybody stayed in the rural areas instead of come to the cities. So when you come to the city, then you would stay in a location. So I was born in a location,
Wow.
which was very rare for during that time for children to be born in the location. So even today, when I'm in South Africa and people ask me where I was born, and I tell them where I was born, they say you lie.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
because it was very rare for children to be born in the location, especially
Wow.
that time. Yeah, most children were born in the rural areas and then they would move to the location. So so because I was born in the location, yes, life was very difficult, but it was easier than being born in the rural areas.
Okay.
Because I was born in the location, I automatically qualified for a birth certificate and eventually for something called a pass. That means it was this big passbook that allowed you to stay in the area.
Wow.
So if the police come, you don't get arrested and get deported to
Yeah.
wherever, you stay. So I was allowed to stay in Johannesburg because I was born in Johannesburg. And so it was tough, because you know, the location was the infrastructure was very different, very unsanitary, and uh, well, when you mentioned about marriage,
Yeah.
they say in South Africa we say a man is geographically single.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, you're single based to where you are at that point in time. If you're at home, you're
Wow.
married. If you're not at home, you're not married.
Wow.
So
Wow.
men are very yeah, very busy.
Yeah.
It's very
Interesting.
rare to meet a man who doesn't have extra partners
Yeah.
or an extra partner. Yeah,
So
they
that is,
always, whether married or not, it doesn't
yeah.
matter. You will always have somebody. And then obviously you have the ones who actually marry
Right.
uh, more women than one. Yeah.
So how does that you think affect the the wife, like the one that's married to the husband? How do you think that affect her mentally, knowing her husband is single geographically, knowing that when he leave for her presence or the family presence that he will potentially hook up with somebody else.
It's something that's it's ingrained in you. You
Really?
see, South
Okay.
Africa has different cultures, you know,
Yeah.
because I was born in Johannesburg. So I grew up with the so-called Western culture, you know,
Okay.
that kind of like taught women to be independent, women to be non-traditional,
Yeah.
women to be, you know, to stand up to men. That never
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
And also women to reject polygamy, you know.
Okay.
Um, so I grew up in the Western culture, but most South Africans, they grow up with the normal African culture, where
Yeah.
you know your husband is going to have another wife.
Right.
You know, you know your husband is going to have children from another partner. You
Yeah.
know, but what's actually being taught when you watch TV is very different from what's being taught at home.
Okay.
Your TV is more progressive, more like woman power,
Yeah.
women stand up, you know. Uh, but at home, you are taught, you know, you have to be humble, you have to be
Yeah.
submissive, you
Yeah.
have to. I think as a youngster, you know, I kind of like bought into the TV thing, you know.
Yeah.
You know, when you're young, you don't have that much experience. Like, I'm an independent woman, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as you grow up, you realize that you know there's so many gray lines in life. You
Yeah.
know, like if you do meet a man who's truly in love with you, and he has another partner, and he wants to make you a wife, you know, um, and everybody is okay with it, it's fine. You know,
Yeah.
as long as you're happy and you're
Yeah.
not hurting anybody, and it's the culture in that particular country, you know. Um, so you kind of like you don't go against the grain, you know.
Okay.
So I have like two friends who are married in that kind of situation, you know,
Wow.
and they're happy. They have children. You know, the husband, he spends 1 week with you, the next week with the other
Wow.
one,
Yeah.
you know, and it's okay with them, you know. And also, it depends also how your husband handles the whole situation. Some men are better than others,
Yeah.
you know, at handling the situation and being fair and being correct. You know, I know
Yeah.
men who really messed it up. You know,
Yeah.
like they would have the two wives, and then they would get caught at a girlfriend's place and get beat up. You know, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, you said a whole lot. I mean, I'm glad that you're being transparent because I
yeah,
personally always want to know because I don't I have a friend Vusi and I haven't talked to him. I mean, when I say years, like years. As a matter of fact,
yeah.
we kind of lost contact. So I
Okay.
used to hear a lot of stories that he say, but of course it was coming from a male's perspective, you
Yes.
know. And so some of what you're saying is some of the stuff that he shared as well. So
Yes.
but growing up there, you talked about growing up in a specific location. Was there a lot of Caucasians in Africa when you was growing up?
We never saw them because we were kind of like in a specific space,
Okay.
like a reservation kind of, you know, a location. Locations are built very far from the city where white people are, from the suburbs.
Okay.
So
Wow.
if you had to have a reason to go to where the white people were, you
Wow.
know. So you had to either have a job, or you are looking for a job, or you are in transit to some place,
Yeah.
you know. So you couldn't just be walking around in a white area.
Yeah.
you get beat up. So I never saw a white person until I was in town. And I think I was about consciously, I mean, I'd been in town like many times with my parents,
Yeah.
but I wasn't like conscious of the color differences.
Yeah.
I think till I was like 7. That's when
Okay.
I noticed, oh, people do look different,
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
was like, oh, okay, this one looks different. The face looks different. The hair looks different. And also another thing, the white people, they spoke either English or Afrikaans,
Okay.
and we couldn't speak none of those languages because we spoke our own languages.
Wow. And did you
Yeah,
all understand their language at all?
no, because I was a child, I didn't understand. I only started speaking English, I think, when I was like 18.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so we learned it at school. At school you learn English and Afrikaans because that time black people were basically being. You went to school to be trained so you can work for white people.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
you had to learn both their languages. Afrikaans is a dialect of Dutch.
Hmm.
So you had to learn those two languages, and so you can go and work, for white people when you grow up. So
Wow.
that's what we were taught. So the first time I actually spoke to a white person, I was around 18,
Wow.
and it was the first time I spoke English like to a non-African person.
Yeah.
And because at school you speak English to teachers, they teach you, you practice, and but the first time I spoke to a non-African person, it was a white policeman.
Mm.
uh, what used to happen was that y- you know if you go to town and you didn't have a pass, they used to give you like a book. It was called a pass book. If you don't have that pass book, you would get arrested.
Wow.
So the passbook was permission for you to be in Johannesburg, right? So I, I was a school kid and I was rebellious. I was like, I'm not going to carry a pass, And so my parents sent me to town to go buy some stuff. So when I got off the station, there were police waiting outside the station
Wow.
and to arrest people.
Yeah.
And I was tall, which was unusual for a black woman. Well, it still is in South Africa. There
Yeah.
isn't that many tall African women, you know.
Hmm.
So I was tall and kind of big,
Yeah.
so people thought I was older than what I looked like. So when I came through, the policeman called me over because I looked like I was not a school kid. I looked fully grown, like a
Yeah.
fully grown woman. And he said, "Come here, sir," which is "come here" in Dutch. So I went, and he was like, "Where's your pass?" I was like, "Okay." I know I've been trained to say I don't carry a passbook, but I was like,
Right.
I'm not in the mood to go to jail right now.
Right.
You know, it's the weekend and
Right.
I'm just not going to go to jail. So I started speaking to him, in English, like, oh, I forgot it at home. And he was like, how old are you? So I told him, I'm turning 18 in a few months. He was like, but you don't look 18, you look old. I said, no, I'm still at school. And he asked me about school. What am I doing at school? And I told him, no, I'm doing matric, which is the final year at
Hmm.
school. And he believed me. Maybe he could see on my face that I was still young.
Yeah.
And then he let me go. So that was the first time I ever spoke English to a white person.
Yeah.
And it was the scariest experience because I was like, I'm not going to go to jail today.
Yeah.
When
Wow.
I'm sitting with my friends in the location and would say, yeah, these white people, when they stop you, you tell them who you are. I was like, oh
Yeah.
God, I cannot.
Yeah. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So, Fatuma, Do you have any recollection of your family being lineages of slaves?
Oh yeah. Uh, what you see, South Africa was a port for the Dutch East India Company,
Yeah.
and the Dutch East India Company, they used to own the ship the ships that traveled on the spice route,
Hmm.
you know, taking spices from India to uh, different parts of the world,
Yeah.
right? To Europe. And so they went via South Africa, right? And well, even though they don't say it out loud, you know, they did offload uh, slaves from the ships. You know, they did have a stop station like for slave ships,
Yeah.
and they did steal a lot of locals.
Yeah.
You know, this is what's going around. You know, you don't get it like from a book. There's no book that says this is what happened. You know,
Right.
but we have our own history from our own grandparents, from our
Right.
own, that's going around. That this is what used to happen. So what
Mhm.
African people did, well, South African people did, because they were being forced into slavery, and it is actually a documented fact that the guy who first Dutch guy to land in South Africa, his name was Jan van Riebeeck.
Mhm.
It is recorded that he owned around 18 slaves,
Wow.
and more white people owned a lot of slaves. So because African people didn't want to be slaves, so they ran and they were staying in the caves and staying in the mountains. That's why it was so easy to capture South Africa, to steal South Africa from South Africans,
Yeah.
because South Africans kind of like abandoned their normal residencies and they went into the mountains. And I know that my grandfather, um, his father had a link to slavery in South Africa, where he was bonded into working for white people just for food, for a sack of mealie meal. We used to call it. We have like this staple food that we eat, which is ground maize,
Hmm.
and they used to pay people with that.
Okay. Wow.
So that I know for a fact that South Africa has a very negative history with slavery.
Hmm.
And that's why it kind of like breaks my heart, when I'm here in America and people are kind of like, yeah, Africans were part and parcel of selling us into slavery.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, when the Africans left Africa and they were stolen to come into slavery into the different parts, Africans were not having a party. We had our own slavery.
Right.
We were not like becoming millionaires and having a good time while our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers were being sold into slavery. We were actually in slavery ourselves,
Right.
because Europeans did come and settle in Africa, and they kept slaves
Yeah.
in South Africa. And case in point, South Africans did run away from the main ports to go live in the mountains, in the bushes, so that the white people, that time the British, don't turn them into slaves.
Right.
Even King Shaka was part and parcel of fighting against slavery,
Yeah.
the capture of the people into bondage, So,
Yeah. That's it.
yeah,
So you said King Shaka?
yeah, King Shaka.
Yeah. So he was from South Africa?
Yes, King Shaka was one of the most powerful Zulu kings, which is one of the tribes
Yes.
in South Africa. Yeah, he
Yes.
was he was one of there were a lot of powerful kings, who were fighting uh, slavery, who were fighting the taking in of people,
Yeah.
and but he's the most documented one because he was
Yeah.
young, he was strong,
Yes.
and he had the ability to uh, create nations because he created the Zulu nation.
Uh-huh.
He instead of because Africa was made up of tiny little tribes here, tiny tribes there, and he said, no, we should become one big tribe, a heavenly tribe, because Zulu means heaven.
Okay.
So we should become the largest um, tribe under the heavens, and then we can defeat white people. you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
him and his cousins and uncles, they were kings. So different kings, they fought very hard, against slavery.
Yeah.
But um, I think what actually kind of like defeated them was the fact that white people had guns.
Guns. Yes.
They
I
had
was just going to say
cannons.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so obviously it was a losing battle, and also they were so far ahead in capturing,
Yeah.
people's lands. They knew so much. They knew so much about contracts. They knew so much about land deeds. And Africans didn't know anything about owning land because they believe that this land belongs to God and no man can own it.
Yeah.
So when white people came with the concept of owning land, it was so foreign to them.
Yeah.
So they thought they were just sharing the land while we all still alive. They didn't know that they were actually giving it to them. Well,
Yeah.
they claim they bought it, but it's still a big thing in South Africa. Like when you say you bought the land, did you buy it from somebody who understood the concept of selling, and did you pay fair price for it? Because the land issue in South Africa is still a big thing, because the
Okay.
majority of South African land is not owned in South Africa. It's owned in Europe, it's owned in America, and the smallest amount of land, I think it's like 28%, I
Yeah.
stand to be corrected, of the land is owned by South Africa and South African people. The
Yeah.
rest is not owned there. So the land is still a very sensitive issue. And the people who own the land, they claim they bought it. So if they bought it, who did they buy it from? And did that person understand they were selling the land, and did they pay a fair price for it? You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. This is we've shared a lot. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna close this out and just take a few minute break. And then we're gonna jump back into this. Very,
Okay, cool.
very definitely one of my best interviews. So let me
Oh,
close it out. Let me close
yeah,
it out. So welcome back to part two of the show for Tuma. I hope I'm saying your name right. But
yeah.
I got really excited when you said King Shaka, if you notice, because I've actually watched a documentary on him, and I watched some else on him, and that's how I kind of know that they got defeated by the white folks because they didn't have guns, and they was very strategic with the spears and all that, and but it was just the guns that took them down at the end. And I remember watching this honestly, as a kid growing up, and I actually watched this twice, and I don't know why that just resonated with me. And I was kind of like sad in the end when I saw them, lose the battle at the end. So when you said that, I didn't even realize it was. Well, I knew the Zulu Nation, I knew that, but it didn't resonate with me that it was in your country.
Yeah.
So man, that's so
It
interesting.
was. I actually have a direct descendancy from King Shaka.
Wow.
It's actually, well, I can't really say it now because,
Okay.
yeah, but I have a direct, my one of my ancestors was a direct advisor
Uh-huh.
of King Shaka. That
Wow.
when, because African people have more than one uh, uh, um, well, in English they call it surnames, but for us it's praises,
Okay.
where they call on to your ancestors, like you take on an ancestor's name. So we have a lot of ancestral names,
Yeah.
and if you call back my ancestral names, you call my ancestral name back to King Shad
Yeah.
directly.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
even
is
on the internet, you have like the whole lineage. So my family lineage goes directly to King Shad, right to his house.
wow. That
Yeah.
is so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about we can just go on. I just so much, but I want to talk a little bit about um what about the religious practice over there? Because I know I've seen movies or videos when they talked about voodoo, hoodoo, some
Yeah.
Christianity. What is that like, or is this even true?
Um well, South Africa is very complicated when it comes to religion.
Okay.
Um we South Africans had their own uh belief
Okay.
in God. Um they didn't necessarily call it a religion, but
Okay.
they did believe in God, depending on which tribe you're from.
Okay.
Like the Zulu people, they had Umveli Nqangi. That was the name, and so it was basically a worship of the creator of the earth and earthly gifts, the
Okay.
earthly abundance. And since Africans had free roam of Africa, you know,
Mhm.
so they would follow the rains, they would follow the water. So you would have Africans go up and down in Africa uncontrolled because nobody owned land. And if somebody found a piece of land that they liked, that supplied their family and their animals, they would settle there.
Yeah.
So you had like different African groups uh, settling in different areas, because nobody owned the land.
Yeah.
And nobody would stop anybody from settling anyway, because this is not your land, you know,
Right.
this is God's land, and Africans are very neighborly even today. Um, so there was kind of like a mix and matching mix up of religions, where you'd have like the religions from the Central African Republic, or from the coastal areas, especially Mozambique, coming to South Africa, where you'd have a lot of paganism come into whatever people deemed worked in that area.
Yeah.
So, and then we had a lot of the people who worshipped, Umveli Nqangi, and then you had a lot of people who had ancestral worship, who are the pagans.
Yeah.
And and then you had the pilgrims come in, who are the Christian, missionaries, introducing and forcing people to be Christians. They would actually burn people's food source. So people would be hungry, and the churches would be the ones who are feeding the people. They'd say, "Oh, because your land has been burnt, come to the church and we'll feed you." So
Mm.
people were forced to seek refuge in the churches, and they had to be born again or declare an allegiance to whatever Christian religion there was, so they can avoid starvation.
Yeah.
So that was the deal in Africa. So you had a mix of people who were like, "Oh, I'm a Christian, I've accepted this, that," but when they go back to the area that they were staying, they would be pagans.
Yeah.
So you still have the same thing in South Africa where people on Sunday they are Christians.
Yeah.
They go to church.
Hmm.
But normally they live as pagans. They would
Yeah.
slaughter goats, they would have pagan ceremonies, they
Yeah.
would, you know. So in South Africa, you have like a large amount of people who claim they are Christians, but they do ancestral worship, they do harvest worship, and they basically practice paganism,
Yeah. Exactly.
even though they go to church on Sunday. So it's very funny like that. You do have like a lot of people who are really Christians and who understand what Christianity is, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you know, I always say kudos to whatever religion you are, you know, as long as you are practicing it like, you know, you know, authentically, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, fast forward a little bit. I want to know what it's like now for the people, like maybe family members or neighbors or people that you knew or know in South Africa. How is it for them now growing up in the culture? And, is it still like that today when you got white folks in the city, black folks in the rural area? Is it still like that today?
um it is still like that. Like now you're getting like a lot of African people who are empowered
Uh-huh.
financially, and so they move into the previously white areas,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they have a lot of modern infrastructure, you know,
Yeah.
like just like the same infrastructure that you have here in America. And so you have like black people who move, you know, to those areas, and also the government is working very hard to bring everybody together and try and make everybody's life equally the same. Like as much as the African people are moving into the old white areas, the government is working very hard to improve the standards of living in the locations. You know,
Okay.
like they're bringing back big business into the locations. They're helping people get loans from the bank to beautify and make their homes comfortable, beautiful, and livable. So you know, when you look at the location now, it's very different from what it was then.
Yeah.
But then you have like the also the economic factor, you know, like property, you know, is not the same amount. South Africa is a very complex country where uh, even though you have uh, black governance, we have freedom like you will not believe. Like seriously, I mean, you can walk anywhere, do anything, as long as you're not hurting anybody. Nobody will bother you. Nobody will stop you for nothing. Nobody will trample on your rights. You know,
Yeah.
there's a very we have like a great respect for humanity
Okay.
in South Africa. Even though sometimes the police, you know, police are police everywhere you go, you know, but
Yeah.
you know, sometimes the police would try and rough you up, you know, for whatever reason. But
Yeah.
it's very rare. It's
Okay.
very, very rare that you would have police stop you for nothing and end up roughing you up, or you know. But we still have the black and white issue
Yeah.
where, you know, the government has tried to have, you know, let's let bygones be bygones, you know, and apartheid happened and now we have to move on and build our country. It's kind of like hard when you have the economical disparities, you know, where
Uh-huh.
you have one group which was empowered and they have so much power. And you have one group which was hoping to be empowered and they failed because the resources were depleted by the other group,
Right.
you know. So you still have that in South Africa. The government is trying hard. You know, they have like a tendering system where they try and bring in people economically, which is greatly protested and blackwashed by different people at different times based
Yeah.
on what their intentions are, you know.
Yeah.
And when I know when white people were being empowered, nobody was kicking a lot of sand, you know.
Yeah.
But now that black people are being empowered, everybody is kicking a lot of sand. It's like, why is it that every time a black person gets to climb up, you know, there's so many people trying to bring them down,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
And but every time white people are climbing up, it's like, oh, they deserve it, you know.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's like when you, I have a friend in South Africa who's very, very wealthy. And I mean, my standard of living in South Africa was not, I was not poor, you know, I was doing very well.
Yeah.
And so obviously I had friends who were wealthy, you know, like bank wealthy, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I was comfortable, you know, because I had a good job and yeah. So he had bought this Mercedes Benz sports car, and we were driving down the freeway, and we got off the freeway and we stopped at a light. I mean, everybody was, this was a very powerful car. It was noisy, it was beautiful, it was, you know. And we stopped at a light. We got off the freeway and we stopped at a light. And there was this white guy. He was kind of like flagging us, wanting to say something, you know. So he opened his window. We rolled our window down to hear what he has to say. And he said, "Oh, that's stolen government money."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's basically the sentiment in South Africa, that if you have money, you must have stolen it from government, you know.
If you're black.
Uh, if you're black, you
Right.
know, because black
Wow.
people don't deserve money. Black
Yeah.
people don't deserve wealth, you know. The history has taught us that there are people who deserve these things,
Yeah.
you know. And if you are black and you have money, you are Illuminati, you are a
Yeah.
thief, you are corrupt, you are,
Yeah.
you know. So those are things that are, you know, I wish that the new generation can look into, you know, and avoid, because it's making it very difficult for black people to advance. You know, it's the
Yeah.
same thing as here in America, you know.
Yeah.
You have a lot of other race groups, Russians, uh, Ukrainians, who come here
Yeah.
to the US. It's
Yeah.
okay for them to come here. But the minute a darker skinned woman comes here, a Filipino, an African, they're looking for green cards. you
Yeah. Yeah.
know, so it's it's very sad that, you know, there is nobody out there who's like a watchdog for things like that,
Yeah.
you know, who's out there correcting people, because it's very disempowering, you know, where you try and shake your past, you
Yeah.
know, to move forward and be part of the new economy,
Yeah.
and people, they still have these things that bring you down. So that's basically what's happening in South Africa now. There's a lot of people who are consciously creating all these taglines to
Yeah.
bring people down, especially black people down, which
Yeah.
is very sad, because the money that's currently floating around in the world, the old money,
Yeah.
most of it was stolen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, we're not saying go steal money, but it's a fact. Most of this money was stolen.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be pointing fingers today and saying, yeah, corruption this, corruption that, let's start sweeping our own backyards.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you feel like, Fatuma, do you feel like through the years in South Africa with the black youth, or people maybe younger, couple of generations younger than you, do you feel like their personality has gotten more of non-acceptance of what white folks have been doing to us, or to the culture in South Africa? Do you feel like they're less tolerable of that, and have the mindset like, well, no, that's happened back then, but now we're not putting up with that. We're gonna make this money legally. We're gonna not let them disrespect us. We're not gonna, do you feel like that mentality has been arising in the culture of the youth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It has, in on different parallels.
Okay.
You have the youth that go to school
Right.
and get educated,
Right.
like in
Exactly.
great numbers. Like, I love when I see the colleges here in the US, and they're struggling to have like everybody filling up, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
uh, the classes. In South Africa, they're breaking down the doors and the gates,
Wow.
because there's just so many people who want an education.
Yeah. Wow.
People are actually literally dying for education. We've had people who've actually died in a stampede to go registered at a college or a university. You
Wow.
know, they actually have stampedes in January and February trying to get into educational institutes.
Wow.
And so you have the youth that will that just want to get educated,
Yeah.
to improve their lives. And then you have the youth who are like entrepreneurs. They will start a business. They will have like a corner table, a table at the corner, the street corner, or they would sell in trains. They would
Yeah.
sell in buses. They would, uh, you know, like we call them hawkers,
Mm-hmm.
and they will sell vegetables, fruit, whatever knickknacks they are, they will sell. And then you have the youth who get into political arenas,
Mm-hmm.
and they work very hard to campaign and be part of the political system, which also can help, with revenue, finance.
Yeah.
So, oh, and then you have obviously, the criminal element, who are
Yes.
very
Yeah.
zealous in becoming criminals,
Yeah.
you know and they do a good job as in any other country with being criminals, whether
Yeah.
you want to say it's a good job, it's a bad job, but it's a good job because it's bringing them the money that they need.
Yeah.
And so the youth, it depends, really. There are youth who have totally okay, let me start from the South African government is trying very hard to have people emancipated from dependence on white culture, right?
Yeah.
Which is the economical culture, right? Because the economical culture in South Africa is very linked to uh, the white people. So they try and have people kind of like remove themselves from being dependent on somebody to make a living. So they try and have people become entrepreneurs. They try and teach you a trade, whatever is it that you do. And like a lot of like in the beauty industry, for one. I mean, the beauty industry in South Africa is a multi-billion rand industry. Our currency is a rand. and a lot of people are part of that, and the government encourages people to be in that, because you don't need to be dependent on anybody. you know
Right.
if you can beautify somebody, you buy the products, you beautify the person. If you can do it without buying products, go ahead. So you don't have to, you know so if because in 1994 we had a situation where all the white people packed up and left South Africa, because they said, oh, South Africa is a failed state because now black people are running it.
Yeah.
And all the white people left, and there was a scarcity of jobs, you know. So now we avoiding the same situation where we depended on one race group for our living, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's better if your child opens a gardening business, or they're selling stuff in the corner, or they go to school, so, and or they create something, or they sew. It's better than them having to work for a, a company that one day will decide that you know they're not needed anymore, and their source of income is gone.
Yeah.
So white people now, they're kind of like, because South Africa is a young country, you know. I think, um, yeah, South Africa is a young country. The average age in South Africa now is 45, I think.
Yeah. Wow. That is
Yeah,
very young.
we're a young country. Yeah,
Very young.
we're a very, very young country. So uh, they have good spirits, and they're working very hard, but I think also because they're very the Western culture tends to be very materialistic,
Yeah.
and they're also materialistic like everybody else. They want the
Yeah.
beautiful houses, the fancy life, yeah. And also most
So
of them. Mhm.
no, go ahead. I'll let you finish that point. I got another
Yeah,
question.
most of them, they copy the American rap lifestyle.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Fatuma, how has it been for you since you've been here in America? We got like 4 minutes left, but
Okay.
do you miss your family? Have you like been like depressed? I'm homesick. Like, how has that been for you since you've been over here now?
Um, I think for the first 5 months, I was homesick.
Okay.
I was really, really homesick. I was thinking, okay, was it a good uh, decision to
Yeah.
stay? Was it not? You know, uh, because America is very different. America is a very individualistic country,
Yeah.
whereas South Africa is a very commune oriented country.
Yeah.
People are always in your business in South Africa.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So here it's been very isolating, where it's very difficult to like meet people and be with people, and that's what I'm used to, from
Yeah.
home. But what I like about America is that there's so much opportunity, to make money,
Hmm.
and people will always open doors for you.
Yeah.
The ones who want to open doors for you will open doors for you, and yeah. Well, and then there's immigration, who take forever to fix your papers, and
Yeah.
but that's a story for another day.
Yeah.
But generally, people will give you a chance in America, and there's always opportunity to make money, to make a living. America is a very wealthy country, you
Yeah.
know, and money is not a problem. I was talking to my sister the other day, and I was saying, America has so much food that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
you know, yeah,
Yeah.
because there is so much food here. It's crazy.
That is
So
definitely the truth.
yeah,
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot
it's
of
a
food go
very,
to
very
waste.
wealthy. Mhm.
I see a lot of food go to waste too. Uh,
Yeah, there's a
um,
lot of food available, and it's and obviously, like I said, getting food in America is not a problem, and
yeah,
people will give you food for free,
yeah,
and it's like they're giving it away, and also, making money. The money that you would make here is fair. Like
yeah,
sometimes in Africa, you you put in so much work, and the money that you get is not as much.
yeah,
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 so when I look at it like that, for me it was a good move. It was
yeah.
a good decision, to decide to stay,
That's
even
awesome.
though it was a difficult time, when I had to make the decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Fatuma, thank you so much for sharing.
You're
I really
welcome.
enjoyed. This has definitely by far been one of my personal best interviews. I've learned a lot about South
Awesome.
Africa, learned a lot about you, the culture, and we would definitely, as you find time, we'll do another show because I'm sure there's more we can dive off into.
Oh, cool.
Thank you so
I
much.
would enjoy that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we'll do it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Bye.
that's it for this edition of Mental Health Matters. If you enjoyed this particular show, if you'd like to be a guest on our show, or if you want a DVD copy of this show, please dial 916 366 4600. Thank you.